Alright, it is time to do another requested what if because I'm doing a lot. I tortured myself for never doing these, and now the prices came, and now I'm gonna have to do them all. ah, Karma sucks. But today, by the way, I'm not doing any more requests because let me do these first. If I once I get done with all these requested what ifs, then I promise what if requests are coming back. But at the moment, it's a temporary retirement. So today we're gonna talk about what if Jonathan obtained a stand. Like during the events of Phantom Blood, what if he could somehow gain a stand? How would Jonathan do? How would the events of Phantom Blood change? Let alone when would Jonathan gain his stand? Well, I plan to answer all of that today, and I'm gonna try my best to answer it. But before I get to telling the overall story, I would like to thank Manic Green for suggesting the what if video. So yeah, thank you. And like stated, I'm not gonna do what if request for a little while. So uh, this is my big what if that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna try to get everyone else's ASAP, but today I'm gonna do yours right now. So you're lucky, I guess. So let's actually talk about the actual what if, shall we? So in this alternative timeline or hypothetical, whatever you want to call it, Jonathan's gonna gain a stand. Just read the title, genius, did you? So Jonathan, he gains a stand. As for how he gains a stand exactly, this is a very tricky one, but I'm gonna go with the assumption and assume that Jonathan just somehow, basically, just finds the arrow or finds a shard coincidentally somewhere in the story. So as for the arrows, it was confirmed the arrows were found in Egypt. So let's just assume that there's an arrow left over that somehow Jonathan gets into his possession, or at least George the First in this case. Jonathan obtains his stand, and his stand in this alternative timeline will be a humanoid Hermit Purple. Now, Hermit Purple is because Jonathan. Okay, so first off, his version of Hermit Purple is not called Hermit Purple because at this point it'd be very redundant. Assuming we get to Stardust Crusaders, it'd feel very redundant to have Jonathan have a stand named Hermit Purple by that point. So in this timeline, it fits more just to give him a stand here. Now in this case, Dio doesn't really know about Jonathan having a stand until he kind of notices bits and pieces. I'm assuming Jonathan gains a stand somewhere around the time Dio stabs himself, puts the mask on him. So Jonathan accidentally gets stabbed by the arrow, or at least a shard of it somehow, and he awakens his stand in the fight. Maybe it can be some kind of evolution-based thing, kind of like Stone Free. Maybe Jonathan can start off with just an OG version of Hermit Purple, and then have it evolved into a humanoid over time. Kind of like Jolene in a way, which could make a great parallel to when we get to Jolene's adventure, to kind of have them start off similar. But in a case like this, Jonathan basically is able to escape Dio. I'd say he's able to find some kind of exit and makes a run for it. So Jonathan, he escapes and he meets Will Zappelli like in canon. Now, Will's going to teach him Hormone. It's going to likely power up his Hermit Purple. And, or in this case, the Passion. I'm going to call it Passion. I don't want to just say Hermit Purple a bunch of times and confuse Joseph and Jonathan's stands. So I'm just going to refer to it as Passion or the Passion. So, Jonathan and the Passion, they're going to get trained on, and with Hormone around, it's going to be even stronger. Like, the earlier events of the part kind of go the same until now, and a lot of the fights would probably be a lot easier, like Jack the Ripper and like Tarkus. Those fights, and like Buford, those fights would be easier. Will's still gonna die in my opinion, since that was fated to happen. And even if it wasn't fated, I really feel like Will was just willing to die there. It is possible that Jonathan could somehow save him, granted, but it would be very hard to, and Jonathan would just need to finish the fight as soon as possible. Now, when it comes to other stuff and how Jonathan could gain a humanoid version of his stand, I think the best place for it to happen would probably just be during the battle with Dio or during the battle with Tarkus. Or maybe the Buford fight, one of those ones. With Ripper, he could probably just use base Hermit Purple to win. The other three would fit a good humanoid Hermit Purple evolution. Now we get to the boat fight, and with a far better stand, and with a stand on him, Jonathan's gonna escape alive. Jonathan could die here in theory, but that would just kind of lead to the story more or less going the same. Except Joestars may just have a stand a little earlier. Who knows? But, Jonathan, he will escape. Hermit Purple, he probably uses passion a similar way to Hermit Purple and is able to find some kind of exits for them. Granted, there really wouldn't be any cameras, and even though there were cameras during that time, the cameras were very crappy. Assuming Jonathan maybe coincidentally found a very old camera from like the 1880s, somehow just hit it, and he found an exit for him, Arena, and Lisa to escape on, then maybe that goes the same. And I feel like Dio would escape the boat alive because he is a very scheming person. Though it is possible Dio could just die on the boat, I personally think he'll escape the boat. If you want, I could talk about what if Jonathan killed Dio in the story, but that could be a future what if of its own. But I do believe that part 1 as a whole, more or less the events would start and go the same. So everything like, you know, all the crap with like Will's death, Dyer's death, Georgia First's death, they're all still gonna happen and they're all still gonna die. So unfortunately, those characters, with the exception of George I, obviously, unfortunately everyone like that still dies. But at least Jonathan's still alive, so I would say that's a plus. Now, going on to battle tendency, at that point, I feel like that part, it would probably go the same. Well, at least the beginning half, so Jonathan would probably be a lot stronger because he has a stand and probably continue on Hamon training. Now, I do believe he would teach George II Hamon, but since Dio is around, and I think Dio would want to take a body, and he knows he wouldn't be Jonathan, and probably he's caught on to stands. So I feel like knowing Dio, I think he would take George II's body. Now, I know there's a certain part of my fan base that ain't gonna like to hear that, but honestly, I just feel like it makes the most logical sense for Dio's character, and plus it makes the story still feel interesting. So, Dio takes George II's body, and I feel like by that point, the rest of Jonathan, like Lisa still kills the superior officer, all that kind of goes the same. But Jonathan would be a little more depressed because Joseph, his grandson's parents, are both gone from his life, so he's likely a little more sad. Arena, her whole thing goes more or less the same. And maybe Straitso doesn't turn evil, but that's like more of a maybe. It's also possible that Jonathan could find out about the Zappellis, and in theory, Mario also could live. I feel like there's a chance Mario can live, and there's a chance that Straitso may never turn evil. But those chances are kind of in the middle. It's possible, but impossible, so I can't really guarantee anything. But for the rest of the story, I feel like the rest of battle tendency, it would probably start off the same, but I feel like Jonathan would probably not look super good for his age. He would look to be around like his 50s or something. So it wouldn't really be a good thing for Jonathan. But then again, he would be 73 during the part. So he would just look still pretty old, but not super old. Not ridiculously old. But I feel like the death of George II and Lisa leaving the Joestars, it would kind of cause Jonathan to lose a little bit of passion, no pun intended, on some training, and he would probably just get a little weaker just because he'd probably be depressed for a little while. By that point, the rest of Battle Tendency kind of starts the same, but Jonathan would probably go with Joseph, and maybe this kind of has Jonathan wanting to get some kind of redemption for getting some of his comrades killed back in Phantom Blood, as I feel like by this point he'd probably go to some kind of PTSD arc. In this timeline, with Jonathan having a stand, Joseph could also obtain a stand, but that's a maybe. And I feel like the rest of Battle Tendency, for a little while, I feel like a lot of the stuff would kind of go the same for the earlier half. Santana may actually be killed instead of just getting turned into a stone. So it's possible that Santana just gets stopped right then and there, and that they just don't really need to deal with him anymore. After that point, Santana just, like, if he's just killed right there, nothing would really change except that he's just dead a lot sooner. Stroheim may never need to become a cyborg. I personally think he still would, but I think that Jonathan and Joseph would guarantee that Santana's, like, actually dead. He's not turned into a stone. He's completely disintegrated. He's completely 100% dead. No regeneration. Completely gone. I feel like in a timeline like this, that would make a lot of sense. But seeing how Jonathan kind of has a no-kill role, he may not do it, but maybe after George's death, he may stop the no-kill role and be more okay with killing. But that's, like, probably what would happen. They still meet Caesar, and I feel like Jonathan would... And I feel like he wouldn't really be as angry at Joseph because Jonathan's still alive. So, yeah, I feel like Caesar would probably... Since Joseph likely knows about the events of Phantom Blood in this timeline, I believe Caesar probably wouldn't be as salty. He's still cocky, though, in my opinion. I'd say a lot of his characteristics are mostly the same, and he's still not going to be nice to Joseph. Mario's probably maybe around, and maybe his kids / Caesar's siblings can be around. So that can kind of flow into that what if, but potentially Caesar's brothers ends up surviving the Wamu fight because Jonathan can help. That's like a potential scenario to come out of it. But I feel like in this timeline, Jonathan, assuming we don't really include them, I could tell you an alternative version where Mario's alive if interested. But Jonathan would probably be able to do a lot in the overall story. He's a very he's a very strong character. He would have definitely gone stronger with Hamon, and he definitely would have been stronger with the stand. So, like, the first Pillarman fight, Loggins maybe lives because they could just kill AC/DC right there on the spot. So saving him in the long term, that's a possibility. I feel like Caesar wouldn't have died because I feel like Jonathan would want to protect him, especially after Will's death. Jonathan may actually be... Sorry about the cough. I'm totally not dying. But Jonathan may be more willing to save Caesar because, you know, everything with Will is probably still haunts him. So he would probably want to save Will's grandson kind of as a way to make amends. And maybe even Will's son, assuming that Jonathan knew about Mario and just couldn't save him in time. So, assuming all that's said and done, I feel like Wamu and Jonathan would have a very interesting interaction as well. And in fact, I do believe Wamu could just die at the place, at the hotel fight with Caesar and Jonathan. That, or maybe Jonathan sees good in Wamu and wants to spare him. And Caesar probably would be angry to hear this, but Jonathan would probably talk him out, saying that he's a gentleman, he's honorable, all that stuff. So, and potentially, I could see Jonathan actually getting Wamu to turn good. But that's more of a maybe. Now, the rest of Battle Tendency, that goes the same. Joseph still dies, and Jonathan's probably going to be even worse about it. He does have Lisa, so he's maybe a little happier. But knowing his son is dead and now his grandson is probably dead, he's sad, but then once he finds Joseph still alive, I think he wouldn't be depressed. So 2, for the most part, would be a lot faster. and I feel like there wouldn't be as many casualties. I feel like Caesar would still be alive. Loggins probably could still be alive. Mario and Straight-So, those depend. It's maybe likely, but maybe unlikely. It's kind of hard. It depends on a lot of stuff, but that would be battle tendency, and that part would change a lot, in my opinion. Now it is time to talk about the next part in this timeline, and that's Stardust Crusaders, which would also change. So in this timeline, Jonathan would actually still be alive because he'd probably continue to train on Hamon. And when it comes down to it, Dio would have George II's body, and that probably just leads the story having Dio just use George II instead. That's going to be the new character who Dio's just going to use from now on, and that's George II. The rest of the story kind of starts off the same. Since Caesar's alive, that means his whole thing happens like in my other timelines. So that means Caesar still has a son who gets killed by Dio, and then we still have Rose and Julius. They're going to be on the group like they are in my other videos. Maybe Stroheim's around, and maybe you can add Dominic and Nico to the story. I probably doubt they'll be here. So the rest of like the story, I really can't say what would happen exactly. All I know is that Jonathan would be there. Caesar and his grandchildren are going to be there, along with the other OG Crusaders. And Lisa also might be here if she can gain a stand. I really don't know how the story would really change. I could see maybe Machina and Loggins going. Whole Horse could join because of Lisa. And, I mean, that's kind of it. I'd say, I guess for the overall changes, I could maybe see Machina or Loggins or both dying somewhere in the story, so Abdul can maybe live. That's like a maybe. Iggy I feel like would live. Abdul or Machina or Loggins, like, assuming you don't put Machina and Loggins there, then Abdul's still gonna die. But if Machina and Loggins are there, then Abdul will probably maybe live. Or maybe Whole Horse can die in his place, I don't know. Iggy will live, though. And I feel like Caesar or Lisa could take Kakyoin's place in dying and revealing the world's power. It really doesn't matter who it is. You could pick either or, to be honest. But for the rest of the part, I think Jonathan would probably just die in the final fight. Jotaro, Joseph, and Polnareff, they're guaranteed to live. Julius and Rose, I feel like are gonna live. And I feel like Iggy and Kakyoin would live. Those are like the characters who I feel like are guaranteed to live. Caesar has a good chance to live. Same with Lisa. Jonathan's gonna die, most definitely. I feel like Whole Horse also has a really good chance to live. If I'm being honest, if I'm gonna have to say, so the guaranteed survivors would be like Jotaro, Joseph, Polnareff, Kakyoin, Julius, Rose, and Iggy, in my honest opinion. And the characters who could live and die, and Whole Horse is in a most likely gonna live tier for me, but has a small chance of dying. Caesar and Lisa and Abdul, they're in the 50-50s. Machina and Loggins are in like most likely to guaranteed, and Jonathan's unguaranteed. So Jonathan's gonna be dying as Stardust Crusaders against Dio, in my opinion. But instead, the story would just be Dio and George II's body. So that'd kind of be how the story would go. And I feel like that since George II could be taught Hamon when he's young, I think that Dio could just gain a Hermit Purple stand power like how he did after Jonathan. So in this timeline, that would probably just lead to Jonathan probably just dying here to Dio. And I could probably see Jotaro also being able to kill Dio still. It's kind of hard to say, but I think that's what I would probably go for in my opinion. Like fight-wise, I feel like the overall adventure, I don't really think there would be a lot of changes, minus from having more characters and leading to probably some more interesting interactions. I don't really see there being a overall grand scheme change to the overall plot. I feel like there could be some plotline changes, but I feel like the entire story as a whole would go the same. And it would still take at least 50 days for them to get to Egypt, in my opinion. But the fights probably are a little shorter, though. So, I feel like Crusaders, that part may be a little shorter, like fight-wise, but I feel like for the most part, I don't really think the story would really change like very drastically, with the exception that more Crusaders are gonna live. That's just my opinion. Now, the next part we talk about is Diamond is Unbreakable, which may never happen. Alright, so I'll explain. Assuming Jonathan's around for Joseph's birth, this could lead to Joseph most likely never becoming a playboy. So if that's the case, that could just mean Josuke just never exists, maybe. Personally, I think Joseph would still be the way he is, so I still think he's gonna cheat on Susie for Tomoko, even though Tomoko is a very ugly character. But I digress. I mean. I hate ADHD. I guess for the overall story, assuming we still get a Diamond as Unbreakable, Kakyoin would probably help. I feel like Rose could also help too. If Avdol's still alive, he would probably join. Same for Whole Horse. I feel like there really wouldn't be too many changes, with the exception of Kakyoin being there, of course. So some fights could change, like the Red Hot Chili Pepper fight and the Sheer Heart Attack fight. Those are some fights I could actually see maybe changing. For the most part, I feel like the parts as a whole would probably just go the same. I think the overall part really won't have too many big changes. Like, I feel like whoever lives and dies there, that goes the same. So, like, Shingeki, Aya, Keicho, Josuke's grandpa, just about all that. Okay, like Kosaku, all of that, they're all still gonna die. I feel like all the Crusaders would live, just because I really don't see any of them dying here. So I feel like for the most part, DIU, Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, Diamond is not Crash, whatever you want to call it, that part would probably just resume the same, but I feel like some fights would probably change in my opinion. Now, the next part is Golden Wind, or Venta, Aria, Aurea, whatever you want to call it. So in this timeline, Giorno may never exist, because Dio is going to use George II's body instead of Jonathan's body. It's likely, assuming he still gets all those people pregnant, like how he did originally, chances are it would just be different characters to come out of this. For example, for all we know, maybe instead Dio just births a girl, or maybe Dio just births a character with a far different stand or a far different personality. It's hard to exactly say, but for all we know, Giorno as a whole could be a lot more different. Let's say for the sake of this timeline, Dio keeps Giorno more or less the same. Like, we're gonna keep Giorno in this, and then the rest of Dio's kids as well once we get to part 6. So assuming Giorno is still Giorno, even though that'd be very hard to, let's just say for the sake of the plot, that Dio still has Giorno somehow. So, in my opinion, I feel like if Avdol lives, he'd probably just be the one to go to Italy. I think Koichi would probably go, and maybe I could see some other characters going with Avdol and Koichi, like some of the Morio guys. Assuming Avdol dies, I feel like it would just be Koichi, like in canon, so overall, I feel like the part would probably change, just depending on who overall just ends up going, and let alone if Avdol is still alive, assuming he isn't dead by Stardust Crusaders, let alone if he doesn't die in Diamond is Unbreakable too. So, assuming Avdol survives not only his OG death, but the Dio fight, and not only that, but through the entirety of Part 4, maybe he can be in Part 5, which is probably what I think would happen, maybe. Koichi would probably still be there and may actually join Passione. I could see Josuke no Kiyasu maybe joining, and maybe some Morio characters there. As for Morio characters there, I assume there'd at least be one character there, or at least two. And assuming there is someone there, I feel like they would probably just die in the final battle. Most likely. But the only characters who I feel like wouldn't die in the final battle would probably be like Rohan, Akira, and Yukiko. Everyone else, good night, you're gonna probably die. But, I guess for the most part, some other probably changes to come out of it. would be the whole Requiem stuff, because, you know. So, like, the entire whole Arrow stuff, that probably happens the same, but I feel like more characters would actually be there. Julius and Iggy are, like, guaranteed to be with Polnareff, in my opinion. And I feel like Caesar could be there, assuming he isn't killed by Dio in the final fight. I feel like he wouldn't show up in Diamond is Unbreakable, in my opinion. So, the rest of the part, more or less just goes the same. I really don't think part 4 really would have any real changes for the most part. Really nothing that comes to my mind, to be honest. So, like, after that point, I'd say Golden Wind. I could see there being more changes there than there would be for, like, part 4. But, like, overall, I'd say Abakio and Bruno are probably going to still die. Abakio could potentially be saved, though, granted. And in the case of Narancia, I think Iggy can just die in his place. So Narancia, he might actually live. Personally, I would. But assuming that you want to keep his death the same, if you want to follow by the fate rules, you could keep him dead. Personally, I would just keep him alive, so I'd have Narancia live. But for the most part, I really don't think there's much I could change. I feel like at least some of the Crusaders would just die here. Avdol would probably just be the one in the turtle. Polnareff and Julius can be alive. Caesar probably would die. And same with Iggy. Assuming Caesar's there, by the way. Assuming he isn't dead by Stardust Crusaders. Which maybe he is, maybe he isn't, who knows. But I feel like for the most part, Narancia would actually get to live, so that's a pretty positive change. Unfortunately, I really don't know how to save Bruno. And Abakio could live, but I feel like he'll still die in my opinion, personally. And now the moment you've been waiting for, the last part of the mall, Stone Ocean. So everything with Jolene starts off the same. You obviously still have Pucci meeting Dio, but instead Dio would just be in George II's body, so like that's kind of all those big changes there. Kakyoin and Rose they're still gonna end up together, and they'll still have their son Tenmei. He'll join the story, and I feel like you'll get Josuke in there. I could see the other Morio cast being there, like whoever lives through 5, like maybe Koichi no Kiyasu can come back. Maybe Rohan too, who knows? For the most part, I feel like we could see more Morio cast helping out. Tenmei, Kakyoin's son, which I would give Kakyoin a son here. He's gonna be around. Not really much would change in the overall grand scheme of things for a bit. Like, minus from the additional help, there'd probably be more positive changes. I think Hermes would probably just die in FF's place in the punishment ward, which is kind of a bittersweet change. To be fair, I'd probably take it. It gives Hermes at least a better death. I'd probably have her actually be in the punishment ward, but actually die in the Ark in FF's place, so, like, gives FF a better reason to live. For the most part, I feel like there would be changes to a lot of the fights, and once we get to the Sons of Dio, I think we may actually be seeing our bigger changes. Because, like stated with the Part 5 thing earlier, it's possible that since Giorno isn't, Giorno has a different DNA in him, he might as well be a different character. Same logic applies to Ungolo, Donatello, and Raquel. For all we know, we may be just dealing with different characters, let alone different stand powers, which could alter the part, like I stated earlier. Now, assuming that assuming that those 3 are the same, like in canon, like assuming we just keep the same characters, keep everything the same about them, and assuming that everything kind of happens the same, I feel like Raquel would actually get the chance to turn good, because I do feel like Josuke would probably see some kind of redemption in him, because I don't really see Josuke wanting to let him die. I feel like Raquel would actually get the chance to turn good. Even if Hermes is there, I feel like Josuke could see potential in Raquel, so I think I'd probably include Josuke there to help Raquel redeem himself in the end. Weather report. I'm gonna assume he still dies because you really needed him to die because the entire world was turned into a snail because of him. So like, why do you really need him alive at that point? It's gonna cause more harm than good. So yeah. As for the rest of the story, I could see Whole Horse making a return here. Polnareff and Julius could probably be here too. Rose and Kakyoin are good. Definitely show up around the final fight with Jotaro. And I feel like, assuming if Joseph continues to train on Hamon, which is something I forgot to bring up, I feel like it would actually affect the part, because I do believe he could just train on Hamon post part 2. And if he does train after part 2, then we would get to see a younger Joseph. So Joseph as a whole would actually be able to affect the overall story. And not only that, but like, we get like so many other characters who could generally help out. For all you know, maybe Jarno could actually make an appearance, which is like a maybe. But I do believe that the universe could maybe be saved in this timeline. Granted, there'd still be some casualties, but like, just about every JoJo part has their own casualties. So I feel like the fight would probably end, and I do believe there will be some kind of group of characters to live and die. Hard to say who exactly could live and die. Jolene's probably a guaranteed survivor, if I'm being honest. I can't really say about everyone else at the moment. I'll have to think through that, but I'd probably just have Jolene and Tenmei as guaranteed survivors. Same with Emporio. I'll think of everyone else's fate is kind of hard to say, and they're more of like 50-50 in my opinion. But overall, that's the overall what if. Well, did you enjoy this what if? It was a pretty interesting one and a pretty hard one to think up, but yep, there it is. I hope I can give it justice. Thanks for watching, guys, and special thanks to you, Green, for requesting the video. At the moment, if you have any requests, I will turn them down because currently I'm needing to get all these requests done. So, thank you for watching. I hope you actually enjoyed the video, and I hope I gave your request justice, Green. And I will see you all next time. Bye.